No one builds a business that stands the test of time by answering to themselves. Let me explain.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Candid Convos with me, Chiwete Onyema. Now today my guest is a multi-potentialite, a serial entrepreneur. He's behind the success of numerous businesses. Not just that, he is one of the most sought after keynote speakers in Nigeria. Olushola Olaleye is here with me, the Olushola. There's this conversation, I hear a lot with people where they say things like, they want to be entrepreneurs only because they do not want to answer to someone.
I think that's a very silly thing to say. You might say you want to be an entrepreneur because you don't want to answer to someone. But can I tell you something?
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, you have to answer to your business all your life.
But wouldn't that be on your own terms?
No, not on your own terms. You see, that's part of what I'm saying.
Okay.
No one builds a profitable business that transcends decades. No one builds a business that stands the test of time by answering to themselves. Let me explain. Listen, motivation is overrated. Passion is overrated. What gets you over the door is becoming a law to yourself and putting yourself under subjection. See, discipline is not doing what is convenient, but doing what is demanded. And if you think that when you become an entrepreneur, you lose that sense of self-discipline, you're joking. In fact, the essence of self-discipline is supposed to be amplified in entrepreneurship more than anything else. I'll tell you why. Because as an employee, your systems of accountability are external. Your HR is knocking on the door every single day saying, did you come in time? Did you come this? Did you come here? Blah, 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 blah. You know that when you see your boss by the hallway, you have to look good. You have to package yourself forward. Now, when you become, quote and unquote, your own boss, the stakes have to be higher. You know why?
Why?
Because now the system of accountability is much more intrinsic. And many times, if you have not learned to become a law, or create, quote and unquote, personal policies to drive your personal growth in career as an entrepreneur, you will flop and you will go along the wayside. So as an entrepreneur now, I cannot open up shop when I feel like it. I open up shop when my customers are coming. So you need to understand that when people say stuff like, oh, because I want to be, let me tell you something. One of the greatest fundamental principles anyone ever told me about business is this: you must learn to listen to your business. So it's no longer about me listening to my feelings. And can I tell you something? Sometimes, as an employee, you can hide under the organization's ineffectiveness. As an entrepreneur, you can't hide under anything. You can't. And so when you say you want to be your own boss, that's why it's a long story. If I could get a lot more into the details, it would have been better. But let me put it this way. A call into entrepreneurship is not a call into living lackadaisically, except you want to be an unfruitful one.
Okay, so I'll just ask this one question before I move on to the other questions I want to be asking now. Should everyone be an entrepreneur?
Absolutely not. If I were coming to this world again, which there isn't, but if there was ever anything like a reincarnation or whatever it is, I'm absolutely not going to be an entrepreneur again.
Why?
I'll explain. Because I think I need to say this, because a whole lot of people hide behind the glam.
Okay.
I don't understand exactly what happens behind the scenes. Now, for context, a whole lot of people who say they're entrepreneurs aren't entrepreneurs. Robert Kiyosaki has something that's called the cash flow quadrant. According to him, there are 4 major ways people make money. One is to be an employee. Second is to be self-employed. Third is to be a business owner. And then the fourth is to be an investor. A whole lot of self-employed people think they are entrepreneurs or business owners, but there's a difference. Now, as an employee, you have a job.
Yeah.
As a self-employed person, you own a job. As a business owner, you own a system. What do I mean? 99% of Nigerian business owners, quote and unquote, are not business owners or entrepreneurs. They're actually self-employed. What does that mean? A self-employed person is somebody who is the life wire of his business. When he's awake, the business is awake. When he's asleep, his business is asleep. He can't leave his business and walk away for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Now, making that transition into self-employed, into entrepreneurship is where the big problem is. Because not only will you have to scale the enterprise, you must first scale your mind. The most important thing to do to move and transit to that is actually to build systems. Now, this is where many Nigerian business owners or fake business owners fall short. Now, do you have a system that can thrive independent of your physical presence? If you go on vacation for 2 months, does the business crumble? Have you built independent systems that thrive and are bigger than one man? Now, why am I saying this? Should everyone be an entrepreneur? Absolutely not. In my opinion, there are some, do I call it proclivities or natural wiring? Some people are more predisposed, into entrepreneurial skills than some other people. For example, entrepreneurship is 99% risk-taking. My brothers, I'm talking to you right now. Not once, not twice, I empty my accounts, for 1 or 2 of my entrepreneurial expressions, hoping that the next day I'll make it back. So many people are not cut out for that risk. And number 2, some who are cut out for the risk don't have the requisite organization needed. On the other hand, also, some don't know how to reinvent themselves, which obviously is needed to steer the ship of your enterprise to the next level, time and again. So, should everyone be an entrepreneur? Absolutely not. However, I'd advise that for you to make wealth the right way, I think everyone has to be at least 2 things on that cash flow quadrant.
Okay.
At least 2 things.
Which is?
Either one you want to pick. So, for example, if I were to come to this world again, I probably would be E&I employee. Okay. I'll probably go work for some hedge fund or be some comms pro, that operates on my own terms, more or less. And then which I would say invest. I think everyone should be investing. I think you can't really build wealth by just leaning on one aspect or one angle. You have to ensure that you find your way around it.
Well, of course, I'm having a conversation with the Olushola right here on Candid Convos with me, Chiwete. And in case you don't know, he's a pastor. And I'm going to ask you first off, how did you become a pastor?
How did I become a pastor?
Yes. It's a long story.
You don't become a pastor.
You were called.
Pastoring finds you.
This calling thing is so when you say you're called, is it people
no,
telling
it's not,
you're
as
having a conviction?
It's not as if God said, God called me.
At night.
I have this joke that some people, God did not text them, talk less or flash them.
Okay.
When it has to, how did I become a pastor? Let me be clear. When I was young, I'd always known that I was going to do big things for God. And I'd always known that I had a teaching grace.
Okay.
And I'd also known that God wanted to use me one way or another to help, break chains of ignorance. And, I don't want to get into too many details.
Okay.
So, with respect to pastoring, even though I'd always known, it was always a question of how that was going to happen. I'd always been in and around the church. I preached my first sermon, I think, at the age of 11 or 12 or 13 at church. I'd always been very active, super active. I'd always almost led my teenage class, either with assignments or with preaching or with service. And that transmogrified into something even bigger. So when I was at the university, I was active. I was like floor chaplain at some point. I was in chaplaincy. I was involved in service units. And right after school, even when I got for my youth service, I became very involved in church. I was actually subzonal fellowship coordinator. They called me Papa back in the day.
Oh, really?
I don't just love the Lord and all. And for me, it wasn't anything title motivated. It was service inclined. So, and then as time will go on, many times it takes someone to spot that also and then choose to mentor you specifically for the assignment. Okay. And so my lead pastor at Celebration Church, Apostle Manuel Iren, took so much interest in me. And about 10 years ago, he actively, started training myself and a couple of other people for I like to put it this way, quote unquote, pastoral work in ministry. Okay. And then, years in, year out, through praying, fasting, rigors in the word, and you keep growing, honing not just, your theological exposition, but also the character and the heart of a leader in the vineyard. And so I became a pastor.
Right. So why do you think a lot of Nigerian pastors have been under fire lately?
Why do I think?
Yeah, there's been this. It's like it's back to back. You're done with one, you move to the next. You're done with. So why do you think a lot of Nigerian pastors have been under fire lately?
First and foremost, there's never any time in history that men of God won't obviously be under fire, right? Now, to be clear, many deserve the fire, while some others is just the mob doing mob things. So, what are the major reasons many are under fire? Now, we must be clear. So, first and foremost, for some, it's for all the wrong reasons. I like to put it this way. I believe that as a pastor, or as a man of God, or anyone in the vineyard, first and foremost, you are held to a higher standard. In fact, even in the key tenets of our faith and in sanctification and holiness, the Bible already lets you know that you've been separated. Now, separated for a particular purpose, called by God for specific stuff. As a believer, you already are separated. You are separated from society's culture to enforce God's culture in your day, which means that obviously you're separated. There's a mark of separation upon every believer. How much more to people who are supposed to herald the good news even much more intently? Pastors, people who are supposed to be responsible for training other people, to herald the message even much more. So yes, as pastors, you're held, to a much higher standard. Let me be very, very clear on that. And some of the ones who come under fire actually fall short of those standards. Let's be clear. I don't think there's anything wrong in people holding you to a high standard, even though in turn I always tell people that the greatest standard for anyone is obviously the word, and everyone must be tried and tested through the demands of the word. Let's be clear. And also, there's no man that is infallible. And so whenever you, quote and unquote, are passing or giving assessments or judging people, always try to extend grace. The fact that one lives in a body obviously means that there will be moments, where they will be, weak one way or another. That said, however, when it becomes a case where time in, time out, there's a consistent pattern of a man of God oozing so much contradictions, right? And acting in a particular way that is out of step, right? With the actual reality of someone who has been called into divine priesthood. Then, if he's under fire, people can fire the way they want to fire, right? That's their business, right? But on the other side, so much of the criticisms are just unjust. And in my opinion, they're misdirected. There are so many things I can say. First and foremost, I believe so strongly that 85% of Nigerians that throw tantrums at pastors actually mean to throw tantrums at their president. But many of them are cowards and not bold enough to actually throw and levy their criticisms at the right people. But many times it's as though pastors are like low-hanging fruits when it's time to criticize. And some of them also have beefs against God, quote and unquote. And some of them know that they don't have the boldness to take it out with him. And so who do they look for? Oh, his messengers that we can look around. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because by the time you try to logically assess why people think or talk the way they do towards men of God. Now, I must repeat, some are deserving. For example, some have turned the pulpit into money-making schemes. And they must be called out. And that must be clear. However, on the other hand, some have pursued after God and done every single thing that they are supposed to do, but still come under fire. Now, you find out that many people who actually criticize them are actually people who just have misguided opinions. I'll give you a very random example. It's as though pastoring is now like an endangered species. For example, I'll give you a very random one. A pastor has the door opened for him when he's coming out from a car. And people shout, "What? Is that what Jesus would have done? Jesus washed the feet of his disciples." Quick question. These same people will see their favorite musician or celebrity have doors opened for them when they come down from a vehicle and will say nothing. Quick question. Having a door open for you when you come down from a vehicle is simply a show of honor or respect or regard from your host in most cases.
Yeah.
I have doors open for me every time when I go round the country speaking. No one ever will raise an eyebrow because I'm going in the capacity as a keynote speaker. My question is, why is it that everybody will do something, but when a pastor does it, it becomes an issue? Another one, they expect that a pastor should never have a semblance of financial prosperity. Now, listen, have some pastors taken it to another extreme? Yes, absolutely. For example, I've seen some peddle fables and fallacies in the name of preaching. People make random statements that, your material possession is in tantamount or is in step with your spiritual growth, which is very terrible. And those statements must obviously be frowned against and shunned against. However, pastors are human beings and can have access to good things in life also. And by the way, let's be clear, not every pastor you see is money hungry. The fact that some people might have defaced and some people might have, given us a bad name does not mean that you solve one extreme with another. So these are the things that we need to talk about. We absolutely need to have conversations about this. Another one also, some people just don't have any affection for God and are taking it out on people who have actually built robust relationships with Him. I hear very nasty things. There was NSPPD conference recently, and someone said, all this team, blah, 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 they're always going for events, blah, 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 blah. I hear the country is the way it is. I'm like, bold of you to think that every time I gather before God, I'm praying for Nigeria. What's your problem? And that's part of it. A lot of it is false teaching. We have taught people to think that the main goal of prayer is socio-economic empowerment and societal development. No, the main goal of prayer is to grow in your walk with God and what you want to do in His name on the face of the earth. Bro, we need to be clear. We need to be clear. Some of us don't go to a place of prayer and ask God for 5 naira or 10 naira. No, there are bigger fishes to fry. My relationship with Him is bigger and greater than bread and water or bread and milk. And so why are you taking out your anger on every single Nigerian who believes in Jesus?
Now, you mentioned something. You said for some of these people who attack pastors now, it's coming from a place of probably they're angry with God and they're looking for someone to, pour everything on, basically. It brings me to the next question, which is church hurt.
Okay.
Right? Now, in case you don't know what church hurt is, it's a pain or abuse that, one faces within a church setting. And I know some people who have experienced this. Right, whereby they were in the church serving diligently and somehow they got hurt by how the church handled situations as regards them, and for some of them they don't even go to church anymore because of that. Some people are even scarred once they hear you mention God, they already think something negative about you. What would you tell, or what's your take on people who are experiencing that right now?
Great question. Now let me start by saying, if there's anyone watching this who has experienced church hurt or is still experiencing church hurt, I empathize with you. And I'm sorry for whatever this might have cost and exactly how you feel. However, can we balance the scales a bit?
Okay.
I'm going to put it this way. Chiwete, have you ever had a terrible experience at a university?
Of course. Definitely. I have.
Did you have school hurt?
Yeah.
Good. Does that stop you from learning till this very moment?
No.
Okay, I'm getting there. Have you ever had a terrible occurrence in a Nigerian hospital before?
Yes.
When you fall ill, do you still go to the hospital?
Yes, I do.
Has any lady ever broken your heart before?
Okay. This is the part I have to think about it very yes, of course. There has been.
Would that stop you from ever falling in love again?
I don't know.
Chiwete,
I'm definitely gonna try it.
Here's exactly what I'm trying to point out.
Yeah.
Has a friend ever hurt you before?
Of course.
Does that mean you stop making friends?
No.
Now, here's the point. One of the goals of the devil is that he tries to make you think that your problems are unique to you. And one way or another, he has kind of done that with the concept of church hurt. I would explain exactly what I mean. What causes church hurt? Many times, what causes church hurt is church people not behaving like church people. So someone comes in within your circle, and you're supposed to obviously be an extension of Christ's love to them, and then you misbehave. Many people misbehave. Many people within church. However, quick question. Does this stop them from being qualified to be in church or not? I'll put it this way. Someone said it this way. The church is like a hospital. Not everyone responds to treatment. In fact, I'll put it this way also. If everyone was responding to treatment, it means we have stopped evangelizing. Because every single time we put... you have to give me time to answer this one well.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay? So, because every single time when we bring in new people into the church, right, there's a process of growth, a process of healing, and so many things. Now, what causes church hurt in some other instance is also unmet expectations. Sometimes people come into church expecting to meet people who are walking perfections, people who don't have pitfalls, people who will never make mistakes, but you will never find that anywhere, even within the pastorate. We are all people who are still having our minds transformed by the word of God. We've been called and separated in sanctification, right? Through salvation. However, we are still being sanctified like the Bible says. So here's the point. No one is infallible. Expect that whenever you come into any system, even the church. Now, however, on the other hand, the church is still supposed to be held to very high standards, which means that many times your hurt is legitimate. And I understand. Where people did specific things to you that were terrible, sometimes it's even the pastor. However, listen, this is where we must draw the line. In the epistles, the Bible talks about how problems must be addressed. For example, for some people's problems, it's actually member to member. And then imagine you abandon the entire institution because of a member. The Bible always tells you that there's a way to resolve conflict. When someone offends you, go and tell the person. If the person doesn't listen, go with someone else. If nothing happens, go and tell the elders. And if nothing happens, you can be separated from them. Good. However, if one church hurts you, or you experience hurt in a particular church, why discard the entire institution? Why throw away the baby with the bathwater? And let me tell you what this does. Leaving church altogether because you were hurt in one church is like avoiding the shower when you are dirty. Because you feel sometimes you're too dirty, or the entire institution is too dirty. So we need to understand exactly that when you abandon the entire institution because a minority have decided to show certain behaviors and are not consistent with the word, the devil is winning. Can I even shock you? Yeah. Even if a majority are displaying in that certain way, does not mean there's not still a remnant that are doing the will of God. Find it. Find them. And let me tell you something. If you still haven't found, they exist. Find them. Keep searching until you find them, because the Bible is clear. You cannot abandon or forsake the gathering of the brethren. And one of the things is this: when the devil wants to deal with a person, he isolates them.
All right, so with that, it's a wrap on today's episode of Candid Convos with me, Chiwete. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Olushola. I had a lot of questions on it to ask, but I guess I'll just maybe some other time we'll have a conversation.
Absolutely,
because I know that talking about this church hurt thing, people, especially when it comes directly from the pastor, it's quite the blow is heavier.
Remember what I said from the beginning?
Yes.
The standard is not your pastor. The standard is the word. Pastors should be held to very high levels. However, if a pastor messes up, God never messes up. And guess what? Like he told Elijah, I have several other prophets who haven't bowed to bow. And yes, they exist.
All right, thank you so much, Shola, for coming through. And
it's a pleasure, Chiwete.
I hope we'll have this conversation some other time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you.
Pleasure, brother.
All right, so with that, we're done with today's episode of Candid Convos with Chiwete. I'll see you some other time. Bye.